Thanks a lot to all my attendees for joining in. My name is Meghna, and I have been in various roles in the IT sector for approximately a couple of decades now. And topic of today's webinar is all about sharing some of my insights, particularly in the field of program management. And program management is a very vast field. So we are going to be centered around program management careers within the healthcare, and in healthcare domain specifically we're going to talk a lot about healthcare informatics. So with that being said, let's get into the webinar for the day. The agenda is going to be primarily about what are different kinds of careers in healthcare, specifically in the informatics side of things. We're going to talk about what is the formal education that's required, what are the skills that are required in general in program management when it comes to healthcare informatics. And then what we're going to do is we're going to blend all these three together to look at if you're aspiring to be one such professional, what is it that you need to know, how, what is it that you need to prepare, what is it that you need to be ready with, so that you have a good and exciting career ahead. And I'll also talk about a few opportunities, the big players in the game. Of course, there are lots and lots and lots of companies in the field of healthcare informatics as we talk. So we are going to try and focus around a few of them, which, one such which I have worked in, and also some of the ones which I've experienced from a very close distance. So we'll try and blend all this together to give you all the information that I could possibly share from my practical experiences. So let's begin with the agenda items. Now, first and foremost, it's important, as I always say, and I always focus on it during my webinars, why a particular field? What is the requirement like? Why healthcare informatics, which is the topic of our webinar today? Why do we really need all of this? Healthcare informatics, though primarily it is a nascent field in several geographies as we talk, it's a very growing field. It's a very expanding field. And it's a great career option. As we talk, day by day and moment by moment, a lot of things are getting added into this space. And I can only anticipate an increase in the number of professionals that we're going to need as we go ahead. So what really happens in the healthcare informatics space? Some of this we probably know, some we are not as used to, but let's look at what we have in this space. So first and foremost, why we need healthcare informatics. Of course, healthcare informatics is healthcare plus informatics. That is a lot of information and analytics about your, as in a person's health. And we are not essentially talking about patient health. We're talking about really healthcare information for all of us, each of us, even for people who are really healthy and hearty. There's a lot which healthcare informatics can actually help you out with. So first and foremost, healthcare informatics has a lot of role to play in ensuring that we have accurate and sufficient data about patients, to begin with, because that's really the zone where we need to act fast. And when it comes to healthcare, there's nothing called more data or excessive data. Everything is more than welcome. And with healthcare informatics, we, as people visiting our doctors, will be able to provide them with a lot of information, which otherwise would have been distributed through n number of papers and documents. And I remember not so long ago, and even sometimes now, we do keep files and files of information related to our family members, or God forsake for ourselves sometimes, just to keep tab of what exactly has been the history, what are the kind of medical examinations we've been through, or what has been really our step-by-step approach or growth. So whether it is two sides of the healthcare spectrum, which is the aging population or the younger generation, we keep a lot of data in files and information through hard copies. So healthcare informatics is actually going to give you that lightweight set of offerings. All you have to do is to have particular logins, and information is available at fingertips. So what I mean is, not so long ago, if I had to get an annual health check done for myself, I would sign up to the the best place that's near where I stay, and I would get an appointment on phone. Let's say, so I would make a phone call to them and ask them to bring an appointment for myself, and I would get a confirmation either immediately or later. And then, as I would go through the health check, I would submit all my samples, then have to wait for, I don't know, sometimes 1 day, 2 days, and so on, to receive my papers as to what has been the results of the medical exam. And then I need to actually take them home, store them somewhere as hard copies. And then every other time that I do even a routine health check, I have to scan through, and the doctor also has to scan through tons of information to get to something. Scene two, what happens today? The very latest health check that I had in the yearly health check, that is in the year 2019, I booked an appointment through an app. I got an instant confirmation because all the calendar was laid out over there. And I just booked the time slot, which I found most appealing considering my engagements and how my days was set up. I sort of went to the outpatient department of the hospital. I provided all my samples as quick as I could. And then so I started in the morning, and before lunchtime, I was home. By evening, my report started coming out in the form of emails, attachments, and of course, it was password protected and the likes. So I could, and only I could, read all that information because I had the password to read it and so on. And I could really, at my fingertips, access all this information. So my life was so easy in 2019 than it was probably in the previous years. So all of this is possible due to healthcare informatics. That's the power. So easy access to information. Of course, we have to be cautious when we are working in this field that information has to be protected. It's information about people, about their health condition, which is definitely not public. And extreme care and precaution has to be taken to store and persist this information. But that's easier to do. And when we are able to do that, we have a very interesting healthcare informatics system. We're able to, using healthcare informatics, compare across different medical procedures. For example, if I wanted to understand how things have been every time I did a treadmill test for myself and what were the outcomes, if I have it stored electronically, digitally, then I could very easily compare how am I doing. My doctor can easily compare, and we both have access to same information and in real time. So there's a lot that can be done. And the example that I gave is a very simple one, but comparison across different scans can sometimes be life-saving. It is very, very important. It is very, very informational for a doctor to have this information at fingertips. Typically, one such organization I have worked in, a lot of scans are done on patients which are unfortunately suffering from dreadful diseases like cancer. And through all this healthcare informatics and through the possibility of comparing across scans, the doctors are able to really get important information about whether things are becoming better or they are unfortunately getting worse. And this is possible very, very easily with healthcare informatics. That's the power healthcare informatics gives to the doctor, and ultimately a lot of benefit to the patient. Healthcare informatics also gives possibility of real-time imaging during intervention. My apologies for using some of the medical terms, but I'll try and explain what this means in more common language. So real-time imaging during intervention. Consider a situation when somebody is getting operated, a patient is in the operation room, doctors are conducting a procedure, which in common terms we call as an operation. Now, there is always the effort from a good doctor to ensure that the cuts that are being made or things that are being inserted into the body are at a minimum. So, cut the least that's possible for the benefit of the patient. And this is where real-time imaging helps the doctor. Doctor doesn't need to cut too much, doesn't need to have too many stitches later. And this is all in interest of the patient because the images are visible to the doctor on the laptops or the monitors around, and doctor can easily understand whether the operation is on the right track or course corrections have to be made by minimizing the amount of incisions, cuts, and other things that are to be made. This is a huge potential. This is a huge plus to provide real-time information. Two reasons. One is, as I mentioned, to minimize the extent of the cut and the stitches and the complications later. Because once a human body is cut and stitched, there's always the possibility of secondary infections getting in. So healthcare informatics in real time gives you that power. It gives you that images in real time, images being compared with what was scanned in past, and so on. So it's hugely beneficial to optimize the medical procedures. Less cuts and less operations. So everything that we hear about something called image guided therapy and pigeonhole procedures, and the likes. All of this is a result of the power of healthcare informatics. It is that beneficial. And remember, as we talk, millions of people around the world have received benefits out of this. So, working in healthcare informatics is definitely something which has a huge potential to touch millions of lives around the world. Healthcare informatics also provides very easy access. It's very lightweight to carry things. It's very easy to access for doctors and patients. How often than not we hear about this popular term called as I want to get a second opinion. Sometimes we want to seek expert opinion. Either doctor wants to seek expert opinion, the patient wants to seek expert opinion, which is probably not available in the same city and in the same locality. Healthcare informatics brings doctors and patients together. That's the huge power that healthcare informatics has. Using telemedicine, which is very, very popular these days, and healthcare informatics has a huge role to play in telemedicine. It would not have been possible for us to have interactions with doctors, irrespective of if you're located in Bangalore, your doctor is located in New York, doesn't really matter today. As long as you can all get online, fix up a time, you have sufficient information, scans, and electronically available documents for the doctor to make inferences, you are on the go, you are ready to take the stage, you're ready to have the interactions. That is the power of healthcare informatics for you. And working in this field, beyond being a very lucrative career option, because it has growth, because it has the power to sustain, because it is something which is going to continue for a long time in the future. Beyond that, it's a very, very noble deed to really be part of and have the ability at some point in time in your career to influence the future of healthcare. And that's the message I want to really start the webinar with, that how do you get here? So what are typical kind of careers that we see in healthcare informatics? So first and foremost, what's important for you to understand is when I talk about healthcare informatics in particular, sorry, the word informatics is hidden behind due to real estate issues on the slide, but nevertheless, if you were to see that, what exactly is this? So it's healthcare, it's data, and it is the ability to save, retrieve, archive, compare. So to do a lot of information processing on this data to really give the doctor the much needed help and to also optimize the effort of the doctors. So very, very important careers in this field take the shape of doing a lot of predictive analytics, for example. We all use a lot of gadgets, wearable devices, right? Some of us do. Fitbit is extremely popular nowadays, but there are many other players in the game as well. So we all are used to, we all are aware of wearable devices to some extent. We have heard, we have seen, if even if we have not used it ourselves, our phone actually contains a lot of apps as well. So what all of these do is continuously they keep, as long as they are active or worn, they continuously go on capturing information for you, and using this information they build a certain, or try to come up with a certain pattern of whether you're progressing in an adequate direction or there's something to watch out for. And that is really predictive analytics, where we are able to predict something before it comes. As we talk, predictive analytics finds its applications in critical care, it finds its applications in preventive medicine. A lot has been done to really understand analytics and use it to predict the possibility of a heart attack, so that even before a person gets to that stage, something can be done and lives can be saved. So, predictive analytics is extremely, extremely life saving, be it in terms of heart diseases, be it in terms of blood sugar levels monitoring and the likes. It really has huge amount of benefits. So again, this is a career option here to stay, very important and very attractive from the perspective of its applications. And I can only and only see the applications increasing for this one over a period of time. Diagnostics, of course, continues to remain. Diagnostics is probably the most uh, sort of ancient option in this field, I would say, because we have always been, for quite some time now, since many decades, people have been successfully deriving a lot of information through scans. We are all aware of X-rays, which is probably the most popular. Everyone has at some point in time seen how an X-ray is conducted. Ultrasounds are pretty common. All of these, and of course, the complex of medical diagnostics like computer tomography or magnetic resonance imaging, all of these form a group of options for you, which are called medical diagnostics. Now, medical diagnostics is going to help you in n number of ways, right from, if somebody has a broken bone and that person is sent off to do a X-ray scan. X-ray is probably the most easiest and commonly encountered one, to ultrasound diagnostics, which helps not only derive a lot of information about health conditions. Sometimes it helps diagnose things like appendix and so on. So many applications of ultrasound as well. Then there is computer tomography, which is like multiple X-rays being conducted in all directions, and you get a host of information from computer tomography. And then there is magnetic resonance imaging, where magnetic field is used to do diagnostics. And it doesn't only stop with diagnostics. So diagnostics is more mainly a measurement per se, but after diagnostics, what happens is this information is typically stored, and in true spirit of healthcare informatics, this information is stored electronically in most of the countries. They use this so that there is easy access, there's easy availability, a lot of information can be obtained. And if a person has to end up getting into a zone of multiple scans, then those scan reports can very easily be compiled, very easily be compared using information technology. So that's the power of medical diagnostics for you. There's a lot of research that happens, for example, medical research, new vaccines, people's lifestyles, to a number of things that are done in medical research. So healthcare informatics also finds its applications in terms of medical research. That's again a very attractive career option. And as I mentioned, the fields and the implications of this can be immense. For example, There's a new vaccine which is required to be launched. There's a medical research which has to be conducted. So volunteers have to be identified. People have to be injected with the vaccine. There can be multiple kinds of vaccines, such as single dose, multiple dose vaccines. And between every vaccine um, uh, administration to a patient, you have to spend some amount of time monitoring that person to ensure that there are no side effects and so on. So there are lots and lots of available possibilities in the field of medical research which blend information technology together. There's the next one, which is about hospital information system. Of course, we have all seen this to great extent, but what we have seen is a lot of paperwork again in this field, and making it very difficult to persist, compare, and manage healthcare hospital information. But today, a lot of the big hospitals and hospital chains have their hospital information systems, which are completely automated, and you can actually have really good amount of access in real time using your phone or your laptop and the likes. As a patient, as a doctor, you have a lot of access. Last but not the least, of course, is therapy. I think image guided therapy is generally to do with rectifying something. It's basically something which is termed as a cure. So even in the place, even in the zone of curing, there is lots and lots of applications, as I mentioned, when people are undergoing a procedure. It can be a laser intensive procedure, where again image guided therapy or the ability to blend healthcare informatics together with the scanning helps to get images in real time and then observe whether everything is on a good track while still inside the operation procedure, and then get a lot of good insights without having to really bother too much with the human body. So it is really, really very interesting what can be done in this field and what's available. And as we talk, maybe more and more and more of things might easily be getting added. So what does it mean to program manage something in this field? Okay, so it's a blend of three things, primarily three broad areas. So you've got to have good amount of understanding. Either you have spent a lot of time in information technology field, and that's how you have got into that information, or uh, you have acquired a management program which equips you with all this information. Irrespective of the field of study, what's important for you to start with is to understand IT program management. How does that happen? How to handle large programs, large software programs primarily, because software has a very important role to play. And as we look at reducing time and space, I think automation and softwares are going to help you a lot. So important is to understand how software programs are executed, are developed. How does all of this happen in a regulated environment? So what I mean by regulated is when you want to release something in the healthcare space, it is very, very important that you understand the in-country regulations. In India, we have several regulations around food and drug. We have the FSSAI. Similarly, you would have probably heard this term US FDA, and FDA is nothing but Food and Drug Administration. So anything that has to do with food and medicine. It can be a medicinal device, it can be a pill, it can be an injection, it can be a medical device. All of them are bound by certain rules for development, for release, for introduction to market. And that's in summary your um, Food and Drug Administration regulations. Europe has its own set of regulations which are to do with medical devices in particular, and that applies to software and hardware alike. So it's important to have some amount of knowledge about these regulatory requirements and how to handle them when you're working through a software project. You could gain this information online. There are several programs which help you get into this space as well as understand more about it. Apart from that, when you join such an organization and start to work on a healthcare informatics program, you will be given enough training. You have to undergo a lot of exposure to how projects are executed, what are the requirements, how is the process built, and so on. Definitely what's important in this space is to understand something about medical domain. So at a bare minimum, it will help you a lot if up until your second PU or your 12th grade, if you have had, or even in, if you are going from the engineering side, if you have had an optional subject, anything to do with medical domain, biomedical instrumentation or something like that, that's going to be helpful to you through your career as you execute some of these programs. So it'll be really nice to understand uh, zoology, and that to human body in particular. Having more understanding of it is definitely going to be your plus plus, although that's not the first requirement, because you are not leading the team in the capacity of a medical doctor or a person expert in the medical domain, but it helps. So whether you go with this background, or as in when you start working in this field, keep your learning edge in terms of understanding the domain, any field for that matter, and medical domain alike. If you have some amount of background in clinical care, if you have worked a little bit or understood what is clinical care all about, then that's going to be really your edge. So, sum and summary, any capacity of knowledge around healthcare will help you prosper in your career option for sure. So, if you're aspiring to get into this, try and learn about it. You don't have to be a medical doctor for doing this, but you can definitely gain this information via a host of certifications and other internal external programs. But make sure you learn more about it. It's going to be very helpful. You need to have some insights about data, imaging, analytics a little bit, at least. Again, you are uh, doing program management in the field as a career option. You're not really a data scientist, but having exposure to data and image processing considerations is going to be extremely helpful for you in your journey to become a successful program manager in healthcare informatics in particular. It is going to be your immense advantage to understand several things around healthcare informatics if you have a blend of these three things. So moving ahead, what are the typical skills that are needed? Okay, so we will look at the domain skills, we'll look at the soft skills as well. And of course, the data portion stays. So how do you really analyze? How is data presented? And the likes for easy access highlighting. It will help a long way if you have skills in this space. So of course, IT program management is not only about understanding program management. Of course, it is definitely, that's one of the core skills, but that alone is not enough. So to add to that, what you need to have is good amount of communication skills. You need to be able, and I remember in one of my endeavors, one of the places I was working in, and we had a very interesting gentleman on our team, and this person is a medical doctor, and we used to often, in a light and humorous tone, make this comment about him. And for the sake of not revealing his identity, I would call him Mr. XYZ, Dr. XYZ rather. Uh, you can actually speak English in two ways. So one is common man English and the other is medical English. So communication is very important in this field, much more than the others, because on one side you will be dealing with the best brains on the medical side of things. You will be dealing with medical doctors. There will be a good amount of people who have studied biomedical instrumentation, medicine, and the likes on your team. So you have got to be able to communicate with different kind of people in terms of the different backgrounds, is what I mean. You've got to be having those right conversations for the betterment of your program. So it's very, very important to have good communication skills, understand the language of the domain. That's very important. So that is when circling back with the second point, you need to have some amount of proficiency in your understanding of medical domain. That's going to really help you with these conversations. Make sure to understand, one other way of developing good communication skills in this field is to sometimes shadow your team members. When I was working on a healthcare informatics program, I used to accompany my team members to hospitals. I used to go along with them. I used to go to a hospital just to observe how things work there, just to be really a silent spectator. But with that, I got a lot of empathy. I got to understand how things work or how things don't work. And that really immensely helped me in my communication further ahead in my program. So it's very, very important to have really strong communication skills, unlike any other field. Stakeholder management is the next very important thing. Again, you will be working with a diverse set of stakeholders. You will be working with, on one side, people who are proficient in data analytics. You will be working with imaging experts. You will be working with data scientists, medical doctors, and the likes. So you have a good amount of diversity in the people you work with. You will be working with doctors who are working for really the best known fields, the best known medical chain of hospitals and the likes. So you will have a lot of diversity in the kind of stakeholders you manage, but you have to definitely be able to do this and really master the right stakeholder management skills to take all this along for the success of your program. You need to understand regulatory programs, whether you're in the regulatory or healthcare insurance space or in the analytics space or whatever be the space this program is in. You need to understand what are the regulations in there. Is it US FDA? Is it HIPAA? Is it XYZ? Make sure you have the right amount of competency in here. And where there will be the best of the best brains and intellect coming together, there will definitely be opinions and there will be conflict. Conflict is not bad, but really healthy conflict is what you have to encourage in your team, in your program. And you have to do a lot of facilitation sometimes to get the most or the win-win or the best of the best situation for everyone. So conflict resolution is yet another skill that's extremely important. So moving on, what does the learning path typically look like for such a field? There's no particular recommendation as such. I mean, you could start with a bachelor's in computer sciences or IT or data analytics. But from a program management standpoint, what would also apply is probably, if you've done your master's in some flavor of management, that's again good too. There is, I know of some of the institutions that offer healthcare informatics or hospital management as an MBA option and so on. So you could even do that. Nevertheless, some amount of exposure to computer sciences or IT and blend of management, that would really help a lot. Apart from this, try and lay your hands over either a course or offline learning for yourself through healthcare, medical science, fundamentals. Try to ramp yourself up, brush your skills if you have already studied this at some point in time, and so on. Of course, this is a very changing field. So the moment you decide and have an option to get into program management and healthcare informatics, you might still have to brush up a lot. I remember my own experience where I had studied a good amount of medical science, human anatomy, and the likes up to second PU or grade 12. And then, of course, I was working through different domains, and then I landed up in healthcare. So by the time this happened, from my academic years to my role in healthcare informatics, a lot had changed. Of course, what doesn't change to a great extent is probably the human body and its composition, but what changes is how do you really diagnose, what are the different kind of scans and options, and what is coming in the imaging space. All this had phenomenally changed since the time I last studied it. So definitely, I had to brush my skills in there to really get through to all this latest and greatest of information. So you will still have to brush your skills, because things are changing. This is a very rapidly changing field. Regulatory standards, I cannot emphasize more on this. Why these are important? Because even if everything else is ready and you're not really satisfying your regulatory standards, you cannot deploy or sell in a particular geography if this is not being taken care of. So extremely, extremely important, because this has the power to elevate the sales of your company and your program thereof, or to really ensure that things are stuck, and hence involve the regulatory aspects early on in the development. That's what I would definitely recommend. Be aware of them yourself as a program manager, and continuously look at how your program is satisfying all of these. And you will definitely have a lot of help and support from the regulatory department in your organization, but involve them to the right advantage in the benefit of the program. And of course, to top it all, you need to be really solid on program management. That is what takes you to a very exciting world of opportunities in healthcare informatics. So, in a nutshell, what do we have? There are big players in this field. There is GE, General Electric. GE has a division called GE Healthcare. There is Siemens, there's Philips Medical Systems, there's Siemens Healthineers, there is Cerner, and so on. So a lot of companies are playing in this field. And I have just named the ones which have a broad spectrum of products, but there are many, many ones which specialize only in a certain stream and the likes. And all of that is not possible to accommodate in this particular slide. So with that being said, let's perform a very quick dive into what are the products that these companies have. So Philips has a host of products. Philips has its IntelliSpace portal, which is more of a image retrieval and processing system for you. There is so many softwares in the space of monitoring. So when you're really, looking at someone who's hospitalized, unfortunately, you look at a screen full of information where all the vital information is displayed time and again. Philips has significant products in that field, a blend of healthcare software as well as hardware offerings. And then, of course, there is a lot to do in the radiology space, in the scan space, which talks about picture archiving systems, and so on. So Philips has a whole lot of offerings. Siemens Healthineers has, again, it's electronic medical records. That's what you typically encounter when people visit hospitals, either as a routine health check or to report a specific problem. But electronic health record is a very important aspect of healthcare informatics. And then, of course, they have their image archiving and processing system called Sengovia. GE has something called Centricity, and Cerner has its own suite called Cerner Millennium and PowerChart and so on. So lots and lots and lots of things are happening in this space. As I mentioned, this is just the surface that I was able to scratch through approximately 40 minutes of sharing a lot of information with you. And with that being said, I want to be mindful that I have, for the last 40 minutes, shared a lot of information, but I would love to hear from the audience what exactly puzzles you or interests you about this field, and do you have any specific questions for me? Okay, so thanks, Sandeep, for asking the first question. Whether this field has opportunities for 50 plus age group. 50 plus age, I think, yeah, that's basically the age group that you're talking about, who's a project manager. Well, yes, definitely this has opportunities. And you will find it very, very common in healthcare that the program managers typically belong. Again, this is not something that I'm mentioning more out of the fact that a particular age group is preferred or not preferred. I'm not talking about that, but really healthcare has a lot of people who are senior, because it easily takes that much of experience sometimes to probably get to things in the program management space in healthcare informatics. So while I have worked in a couple of these organizations, I have seen people who are really tenured, and they are playing the role of program manager in this field. So yes, it is possible given you have a right mix of other qualifications that are required. And above all, if you have been in the field of healthcare informatics for quite some time, your knowledge of regulatory standards and healthcare in general is going to be unparalleled. So yes, there are a lot of opportunities for people in the advanced age groups as well, not only as program managers, but there are several other roles as well where opportunity exists in this field. The next question that I see, what are some of the companies to look for opportunities in India? So in India, or irrespective of where you are located or planning to start working from, all these companies have presence in multiple countries. Yes, they all have presence in India. Cerner has a development center. GE Healthcare has development center, rather not one, but GE has multiple development centers in India. There's also Siemens Healthineers, as well as Siemens Medical Systems and so on, Philips Medical Systems. All of these have development centers, and most of these have development centers in Bangalore as well as in Pune and in multiple other places around the world. So yes, there are a lot of opportunities in India. When I mentioned about my tenure in two of such companies in the healthcare informatics, I have worked in India itself in both of these companies. So yes, it is possible. There are options. For those who have completed bachelor's in any science field like biotech, what would be the best move ahead for a program manager academically? I would say these days, again, it is quite attractive to blend a lot of program management with domain expertise. And why this is so is because products are becoming more and more sophisticated. A lot of information and insights are required. So, as an option, this is a very good option, biotech and getting into program management, since such a person would already have some amount of exposure because of the study in the field of biotech. Already there is healthcare or biomedical background. So now what is required to be developed is something in the program management space, and there are a host of certifications that you can typically do. But the healthcare industry does not rely so much on certifications only. Like, you have the certification from PMI called PMI ACP, and then there is also, for traditional program management, there's a PMP, PGMP. But healthcare industry does not rely specifically on certifications only. They also look for exposure. So I would say start wherever wherever you land up as your job option. Start with looking at avenues for program management. Start gathering program management experience, because this field relies heavily on experience than any other. Remember, healthcare is one such field. Overall, we often use this term for medical profession. We use this term practice. So it's all a lot about learning. Continuously you learn. So similarly, this thought also applies to a career in program management. They look for solid experience of doing some amount of program management. What would be the best move? Start with managing small programs if you have never done program management, and then get on to programs which are more complex, with a lot of headcount and people working together, and so on and so forth, or a multi-year program or product development. Try to lay your hands over such an experience, because that is what will help you much more. PMP, PGMP are definitely good mixes, but the healthcare industry in general does not rely heavily on them, and hence I also kept it a little away from my presentation per se. I hope that answers your question, Sandhya. There's another question from Rajkumar. So, Rajkumar, does program management require PMP? Is your question? Not really. As I mentioned, some part of it is covered in my response to Sandhya's question, which is about, how do you really move ahead with program management? Well, you do a lot of on-the-job work in comparison with really acquiring a PMP certification. The way programs are being executed is moving to more modern techniques like Scrum and Scale Agile frameworks and the likes. So PMP is less and less of a recommendation these days, and hence it's not an absolute must as such. PMP or Prince 2 could be a recommendation for a very limited number of jobs. It could be explicitly mentioned in the job description for a limited set of jobs, particularly sometimes. And again, the government sector in India is not very keen on having people PMP certified if they want to lead programs. But I have seen that specific to some of the roles that are bound in Europe, for example, where you know it is much more recommended to do a PMP, but not so much in India. I'm not a PMP certified person myself, but I have been a program manager, and I have been a program manager in healthcare as well. I don't see that trend as much. So Rajkumar, it's not an absolute must to acquire a PMP as such. Okay, there's a next question from Sandeep. Once someone has program management experience in another domain, tough to get break in healthcare as it needs a lot of knowledge. So tough to get breaks, but then how to get an opportunity? I have not come across too many situations where it's tough to get a break, because very rarely you will find a mix when you're, let's assume you're the person who's hiring, then very rarely you find a mix of healthcare domain expertise and really experience on the products and program management in healthcare and so on. That's sometimes rare, and hence companies are willing to look at least two out of the three. So if you have some amount of solid program management experience, good track record behind you, then it's easy to get the opportunities. What people typically look for, and that is, your inclination to serve in this field, because this is not easy. Unlike several other program management options, this field is much more difficult. And why this is difficult? Because this has a direct impact on humans in any form or the other. Even talking about diagnostics, they are a help to the doctor, but yes, we are finally dealing with human race and the like. So there is a lot of responsibility we bring to the table, and hence people are really willing to look at solid experience in program management and in regulated industry. This can be from a different domain. I mean, if you have worked on projects which are in healthcare insurance, for example, health insurance, and then getting on to healthcare informatics, that's easily possible because you have some portion of healthcare information and expertise already. And above all, I have seen one thing very, very typically when looking for opportunity in the healthcare space, and that is to do with your inclination to learn. So, if there is somebody who comes with a solid background in program management, the hiring manager might be more than willing to really look at and give this a serious thought whether this person is groomable and has the intention to gather more information. So definitely that is possible, and my own career is a testimony of that. When I started working as a program manager in one of the healthcare informatics organizations, that was a time I had solid program management experience, but not from healthcare. I had come from a different. Is it more of jumping to the next question? Is it more of the application of project management in healthcare industry? Definitely yes, but it has also to do with, there are few distinctions, and if you've been through the webinar this evening, then the distinctions are in terms of how to execute regulated projects and programs. That is very, very important. So you've got to be ace in that background, in that understanding, and that is what will give you a very nice blend: program management and healthcare, and that too some amount of serious regulatory experience. The next question from Sandeep again. Can I get connected with you to take it, further in the knowing? Yes, definitely. We can get connected. I typically respond in real time most of the times over my contacts on LinkedIn. So if you search with my first name and last name, Meghana Parwate, you will be able to locate me very, very easily. And we can definitely get connected if you want to have more of a dedicated conversation. I would definitely be ready to help you out. So, Sandeep, yes, we can get connected. Feel free to send me a request, and I will definitely help us set up some time together. So, we have approximately 5 more minutes. Was there any question which you feel you need to understand a little bit more than the response that I provided? Was there anything like that? I would be more than happy to repeat it or zoom in a little bit more than what I did earlier. Okay, so looks like we have good responses. Are there any new questions as you heard some of the responses, or anything that came to mind while in this last few minutes of Q&A? Okay. So one question which has very recently entered into the queue: what is EU? EU is European Union, and MDF and MDR. These are regulatory standards related to medical devices. Okay, so if you want to produce and sell a medical device, particularly sell a medical device in Europe, anywhere in Europe, then you have to follow certain regulations. That's nothing but your EU MDR MDF. And your EU MDR MDF applies. So when we say medical device, it also applies to the software side of it. Okay. So medical device is definitely, your Fitbit is a medical device, your ultrasound scan is a medical device, and the likes. Definitely all of these are medical devices, but at the same time, an image processing software that's used together with your CT scan or your picture archiving and storage systems, these are all medical devices in those terms. So the regulation, like regulation coming from US FDA, that's Food and Drug Administration, or the European Union Medical Devices Regulation, all of these apply equally to hardware as well as software, and a blend of both if you have them. If you have a CT scanner and you have a software that goes with it, it applies to both. So you have to be really aware of and obliged to the standards irrespective. So just like you have FDA in the States, you have in the European Union, you have your MDR, MDFs, which is mainly medical devices regulations. I hope that answers your question, Sandeep. What we have next is question from Sandhya. Since I got in late, could you brief me on good institutions to get a PM degree? I can definitely pass this on to the correspondents or to my co-host from Dheya Career Mentors, because they are definitely maintaining a good enough repository of what this looks like, and would be really, apt for them to share some good institutions. But of course, I can tell you about degrees in general. So you can come up into this field with a bachelor's degree in informatics or computer sciences or instrumentation or electrical engineering and the likes. Those are all good options to get into this field. This can be a bachelor's degree in engineering, or this can be a bachelor's or master's in science. For that matter, that could be your starting qualification. We are also seeing a host of entries into this field from people who have done Masters of Business Administration or MBA from renowned institutions. And a lot of colleges have now started offering healthcare or hospital management or hospital IT or healthcare IT as one of the streams of specialization. So you could do that as well, really. That will also help you get easy entry into this field. So that can also be your formal education. Nevertheless, so one aspect is definitely your formal education, medical, biomedical, or instrumentation, or anything to do with human biology and the likes, definitely a good entry point. Masters, MBA, MEM Tech, definitely good entry points. And beyond that, very important thing to bring together with you is the ability to learn as you work, because this is a very, very rapidly changing field, and the right applications of this are very important to be able to touch lives of millions of people around the globe. So very, very important for you to keep pace with the learning as well, because if you, even if you talk about regulations are changing day by day. So even from the regulatory aspect, you'll have to learn something new as you get into this field. So I hope that was useful. And we are at time. So thanks a lot. If there is a desire to further perform a deep dive, as requested by some of you, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and we can set up some time together for a more in depth interaction.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone.
Everyone for joining this evening.